Hi everyone, this is Angel Crusher with another Raid Shadow Legends video. Today we're going to be discussing some non-legendary options for speed boosting support champions. Now these are all going to be champions. They're going to have some sort of turn meter boost built into their kit, along with some other support that will help your team along and progress in dungeons, the arena, and faction wars. So I've got 4 rare options and 4 epic options that we're going to discuss and rate and talk about which ones are going to be the best options for you if you haven't come across some of those very powerful legendary speed boosters. So let's get right into it. Alright, let's start off our list with number 8, Avir the Archmage. Avir is a rare dwarf champion who is one of the newer champs added in the last patch. Avir has an A1 that attacks one enemy and has a chance to put a poison on them, an A2 that attacks all enemies and has a chance to put the small version of decrease attack and decrease speed on enemies under a poison debuff, and then finally his A3 is the turn meter increase, which boosts all allies' turn meter by 15% and in addition heals all allies by 15% of his maximum hit points. Now this books down to a 4-turn cooldown, which I believe is actually the longest of all the cooldowns as far as the turn meter boosting champions go. He is definitely the weakest out of all the turn meter boosting champions, and I would not dedicate very many resources into leveling him up or boosting him up. I would probably only go as far as 4-star with him. If you pick him up early in the game and you need someone that adds a little bit of turn meter boosting and a little bit of healing to your dungeon runs and as you're progressing. So let's get into the next champion. Coming in at number 7 is Haruspex. He is a Void rare champion from the Lizardman faction. He has an A1 that attacks twice and has a chance to place 2 small poison debuffs on one enemy. His A2 fills the turn meters of all allies by 15% and places a 15% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. This books down to a 3-turn cooldown, all of which is a vast improvement over Avir the Archmage's kit. And then finally his A3 revives a dead ally with 30% hit point and fills their turn meter by 30%. I would say overall Haruspex is actually a very decent champion. If you get him early in the game, he's definitely worth resources. He can place the role as a speed booster on your team. He can put a little bit of damage out, and he's a reser, albeit only a single target reser. I have him at level 60 with full masteries, and I used him to 3-star all of Lizardmen Faction War 21. He is one of only 2 Lizardmen in the faction that actually has a res built into his kit. So I believe that Haruspex is definitely a champion that you can't go wrong putting resources into, especially if you're working on faction wars. Coming at number 6 on my list is Diabolist. She is a rare champion from the Demon Spawn faction. She has an A1 that attacks one enemy and has a small chance of placing a sleep debuff for 1 turn. Her A2 attacks all enemies and places a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. That is a 3-turn cooldown when booked. And then her A3 fills the turn meter of all allies by 15% and decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 15%. And that was on a 4-turn cooldown when booked. Overall, it was a toss-up for me to determine whether to put Haruspex at number 6 or Diabolist at number 6. I went ahead and opted to go with Diabolist since she is a farmable champion from stage 12 of the campaign, and thus is much easier to acquire than Haruspex is, which comes from a Void Shard. Overall, I think you can feel confident in investing Diabolist early in the game. She'll help you get through some content early, and I think she'll actually benefit you in faction wars, at least to the mid-levels as well. Coming in at number 5 on my list is Gorgorab, an epic champion from the Undead faction. Now, Gorgorab could very arguably be much higher on the list, probably in the top 3. However, as far as just raw turn meter boosting, he's one of the worst out of the entire lot. He does, however, have a very, very good kit that helps you get through dungeon content, arena, and faction wars. I personally have him at level 60 fully mastered, and he helped me 3-star all of Undead Faction War 21. His A1 attacks one enemy and has a chance to remove 1 random buff. His A2 fills the turn meter of all allies by 15% and places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. This is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. And then finally his A3 revives any dead ally with 25% hit points, then heals all allies by 25%. This is a fantastic ability and almost completely necessary in faction wars. And this is on a 5-turn cooldown when booked. So overall, Gorgorab is a very great champion. If you pull him early, completely put resources into him after your campaign farmer, he will definitely be a carry through most of the game for you until you open much better champions. Coming in at number 4 on my list is Apothecary, a rare champion from the High Elf faction who's one of the most sought after early game champions. If you're lucky enough to pull an Apothecary early, do not use him as food. After you complete your campaign farmer, you're going to want to utilize the rest of your resources to level up Apothecary. He is a very great support champion that will help you complete most early, mid, and late game content. I personally have Apothecary at level 60 fully mastered, and he was able to help me get through most content until I was able to open some very busted legendaries, and I still utilized him to complete 3-star Faction Wars 21. So before I get into his kit, I will say that most of my top 4 are fairly interchangeable. They all have different support abilities in addition to their turn meter boosting that helps your team out in different ways. So really, which one you use is going to be determined probably on which one you open first and put the resources into. Now, as your teams evolve, you might want to interchange the different turn meter champions to help utilize and help support your teams in different ways. So let's get into his kit. He has an A1 that attacks 3 times at random. His A2 heals a target ally by 35% hit point. This heal can be critical. This books down to a 2-turn cooldown, which is huge. He is one of the best single target healers in the game. His A3 places a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns and fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%. This is on a 3-turn cooldown. Overall, Apothecary is a great rare champion. He's actually better than probably most epics in the game. If you pull an Apothecary, feel confident in spending resources on him. They are not going to be wasted. Coming in number 3 on my list is High Khatun, an epic champion from the Barbarian faction. I have her slightly edging out Apothecary because she is a champion that you can obtain through playing the game through login rewards, and you do not have to worry about randomly obtaining her through a shard like you would Apothecary. She also has a very good support kit, which allows her to be utilized in many areas of the game. She's very good in arena, she's very good in dungeons, and she's actually very good on clan boss as well in certain teams. Her A1 attacks 1 enemy and has a 25% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. This is a very good ability to have as well, anytime you can decrease your opponent's speed. Her A2 fills the turn meters of all allies by 15% and places a 30% increased speed buff for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown with Booked, which is the same as Apothecary. And her A3 attacks all enemies and has a chance to decrease the turn meters of all of them by 15%, which is also a very good move to have. Anytime you can manipulate your opponent's turn meter as well as increase your own allies' turn meters is a great ability to have in a champion. So High Khatun is another champion you can confidently level and utilize early game. She's also very, very good in Faction Wars for Barbarians. I also used her on my level 21 Faction Wars team as well. Coming in at number 2 on my list is Golden Reaper, a Void epic champion from the Knight Revenant faction. Golden Reaper is a much harder champion to obtain than any of the aforementioned champions so far because she is a Void epic, which are much harder to obtain. Golden Reaper has a very good kit. Starting it off, A1 attacks 1 enemy, has a 30% chance of decreasing the cooldown of one of a random ally's skills by 1 turn. It's an interesting ability. Anytime you can cycle through turns faster is nice. The A2 is a 4-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, and has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns, and decreases the turn meter of each target by 20% if they are not under a decreased attack debuff. AoE decrease attack is a very important debuff in the game to have in many aspects of the game. It's imperative in some areas of Faction Wars to be able to get through the waves without dying. I would say this is a very good ability. I wish it was on a 3-turn cooldown instead of a 4, but other than that, it's a great ability. The A3 places a 30% increased speed buff for all allies for 2 turns and boosts their turn meter by 20%. This is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. And this is the highest of all the turn meter percentages we have seen out of any of the champions thus far. So overall, Golden Reaper is a great champion. Like I said, a harder champion to acquire. She's actually one of only 2 epics in the game that I have not been able to open yet. I would have loved to have had her in Faction Wars because she would have been very beneficial there. So I think she would be great on any Faction Wars team. I think she'd be great in any dungeon content with the AoE attack down and the speed increase and turn meter increase. Coming in at number 1 on my list is Seeker, an epic champion from the Undead faction. Seeker is a very tanky champion that has a great kit. His A1 attacks 1 enemy 2 times and has a 50% chance when booked of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn. His A2 on a 3-turn cooldown when booked fills the turn meter of all allies by 30% and places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. This ability grants an extra turn, which is huge. And then finally he has an A3 passive that heals this champion by 20% hit points and places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns when hit with a critical hit. So not only is Seeker very tanky, but when he takes a critical hit, he automatically places the 60% increased defense buff on the entire team. This is absolutely phenomenal in the arena where everyone has 100% crit and almost everyone does AoE damage. As soon as he takes his AoE hit, he gives everyone on the team that 60% increased defense, so they have that before they take their damage. So he is great at protecting the entire team in arena and in any content for that matter. He also healing himself is great as well. Now, you start off with his A2, which fills everyone's turn meter by 30%, puts that 50% increased attack buff on everyone, and then grants him an extra turn, which helps him cycle through his turn so much faster. It says it's on a 3-turn cooldown, but it's essentially on a 2-turn cooldown, because as soon as you use that ability, then you go in and use his A1, which resets it down by 1 turn. And that A1 is great as well because you're able to provoke one of the most deadly person on your opponent's team, so they can only use their A1 ability. And they'll come back and attack him, who's very tanky, and he'll be able to survive that. So overall, Seeker is an amazing arena champion. He is great in dungeons, and he's featured on many high-end late-game clan boss teams. I also personally have him at 60 with fully mastered, and he helped me get through 3-starring all of Undead 21 Faction Wars team. So Seeker is an amazing champion. He does not have the built-in speed buff like a lot of the other champions on the list do, but he has that 30% increased turn meter, which is the highest in the game. Even legendaries don't have higher than 30%, so he's equal footing right there. So Seeker's a phenomenal champion. If you get him, use him, utilize him, put resources into him, and you can use him as a carry throughout most of the game. All right, everyone, that's going to wrap up today's video. I know it can be frustrating when you're not able to open those busted legendaries that we all seek after, but I hope you realize that there are some options in rares and epics to help you get through various content of the game. In fact, some of these champions we reviewed today are absolutely necessary to complete Faction Wars. So just know that if you're able to pull these champions and you level them up and utilize them, even if you open better champions later on, you're still going to be able to use these in all aspects of the game. So this has been Angel Crusher. Please like and subscribe, and I'll have some more videos coming out very soon. Thanks. Have a great day.